Hey guys, I just wanted to share my Barbarian with you guys today. He's a level 80 Whirlwind Barbarian. I know there are many guides out there and maybe you guys might learn something today. Otherwise, I just wanted to share my journey with you guys, so yeah, let's get on with it. Now, this is my gear. I'm going to start off with that. This is my helm. I have the aspect to reduce damage from bleeding enemies, and I'm constantly bleeding, so it's usually always up. Along with that, I would say life is good to have in your helmet, cooldown reduction, and armor. Anything else is fine. For your chest piece, Rage of Harugath is a good option. This build revolves around having low cooldown, and it helps getting your shouts up quicker, so it's kind of mandatory. But if you do not have it, do not worry, the build still works fine without it. This just makes it better. Now for my gloves, everybody uses gores and I like not to use gores as you have to leave Whirlwind to get the proc, and I do not like doing that. I much prefer to right click and keep going. And if you like that playstyle and you find it clunky to keep leaving Whirlwind to get the proc, then these are the gloves for you. You want crit chance, you want ranks of Whirlwind, and anything else is fine. Now the imprint is just a quality of life, it just pulls enemies towards me, so it's not mandatory at all. Now for the legs, you can go many different ways, but these are pretty solid pants all around as it gives you a barrier every time you heal, and it procs off healing potions. So barrier is a good defensive buff, so it's nice to have. For the boots, you want movement speed, you want strength. Ideally, you would want fury cost reduction, and I did not find that, so these are my current boots. As for the aspect, is really nice as you have like a 90% crit chance maybe with Whirlwind, so you get a movement speed buff. As you can see, I've stacked a lot of movement speed, and it makes my Whirlwind playstyle more fun. As for my amulet, this is the other place where you can stack movement speed. So I put movement speed, and it's the only other place you can have cooldown reduction other than the helmet, so this is where it is. As for the aspect, it gives me more armor when I'm dealing damage, so it's another defensive layer. And you will notice that armor is the best defensive stat late game, so it's really nice to have. Now, I would say 3 aspects are mandatory in this build. This is one of them. And this pretty much reduces the cooldown of your shouts when there are nearby enemies, and you want to keep spamming your shouts, so one of the best aspects for you. Along with that, I would say you want to go full offensive on your rings as much as possible. I found this ring, which is like pretty much perfect. Vulnerable damage, slow damage, crit damage, and critical strike. This is my other ring. It has close damage, crit chance, crit damage. It has a life roll here. I would prefer it if it had a 4th damage affix, but that's fine. It's still beneficial to the build. It just makes me a bit more tankier. Now, this is the second aspect I think that's really mandatory with this build, as it makes your playstyle really smooth. As your shouts give you more fury per second, which is more uptime on your Whirlwind, so you don't feel rage starved. The third aspect I would say that's mandatory for this build is this one, as it gives a huge crit chance bonus to your Whirlwind, and that's pretty big. As you can see, my base crit chance is 40%. It doesn't take into account my talents, it doesn't take into account this aspect, so you get pretty close to like 90%, maybe even like higher than that when everything comes together. So this is the third aspect I would say is mandatory. The 2-hand mace, the 1-hand weapons are all stat sticks. Now in this aspect that I've taken, it gives me a damage buff when I have a barrier active, and it synergizes well with the pants I showed you earlier. The aspect on this I've shown you, and one thing I want to tell you guys is that the stats on your stat sticks apply to your main weapon, so you would ideally want core damage, crit damage, vulnerable damage, close enemy damage as your primary stats, but because I was not able to find those, I still have room for improvement in these slots. The ideal thing would be something similar to this, but instead of strength and stats, you would want core damage and you would want close enemy damage. Hey, but stats aren't that bad, honestly. It's still damage. Strength is damage, stats is crit chance, more crit chance, strength, it's more resource regeneration, so it's not bad at all. This aspect out here pretty much gives me more damage as long as I have a lot of fury, and usually you have a lot of fury when you pop Rallying Cry. Now this aspect pretty much gives me more damage when I'm berserking, and just puts a bleed dot on them, which is nice. As you can see, the DPS of this weapon is pretty much the best I've seen so far, and there's very less room for improvement when it comes to DPS. The stats are not ideal. It does have crit damage, it does have strength, but I would definitely prefer if it had core damage over the other two, or vulnerable damage. Um, in this build, for your weapons you want to use emerald gems, for your armor you want to use red ruby gems, and for your jewelry you want to use skulls. As you can see, because I've stacked skulls out here, my armor and like a lot of armor percentage on my gear, you can tell like my defense is pretty nuts. Like I have 81% damage reduction just through my armor without any damage reduction stats. So it's really, really defensive. I'm not even buffing myself with challenging shout or anything like that. Or my barrier. So the defense is good, the offense is good. Now I want to show you my expertise. You're using a two-handed sword, so you get this one. Along with that, you want to use two-hand axe expertise as you're making targets vulnerable constantly, so you get more damage. Now the way you get people vulnerable very often is with pressure points. Your Whirlwind pretty much makes them vulnerable, like has a 30% chance, and that's pretty much has like 100% uptime. Along with that is you have very few choices when you're going down the skill tree, and the only thing to explain on this tree out here is this right here. Now the point No Mercy is really, really strong. For 3 points you get 9% crit, and it says against all the CC enemies you get 9% crit, and that's the reason why you take 1 point in hamstring, because you're constantly bleeding, so you slow them and you get 9% crit on them. So this is the only thing you should understand. Everything else is very, very straightforward and self-explanatory. There isn't really much choice when it comes to choosing your skills. You could go a bit more defensive with taking more points in out here. You could take a bit less offensive, but that's personally just a choice thing. Because I am so defensive on my gear and my aspects, I felt it was not needed. So I try to go as offensive as I can, usually. Now for your ultimate, you want to take Wrath of the Berserker, as it gives you another damage buff. And for your main last point, I prefer Unconstrained, as it gives me more berserking duration and uptime on my damage. Now you can take Unbridled Rage, it does more damage, but it makes my skill again clunky, and as you can tell, I do not like a clunky playstyle, and I do get rage starved a lot, so I do not like that. But both are solid options. If you want more damage, you can always take Unbridled Rage. I didn't feel I needed the damage, I liked smooth playstyle more, so I decided to take Unconstrained. Now, my Paragon tree. One thing to note about my Paragon tree is that it is very, very straightforward, and there is not a lot of ways you can mess up your Paragon board as long as you follow one principle. The one principle that you should know about Paragon trees is that glyph sockets are insane. Legendary nodes might seem good, but your primary focus for, I would say, most builds is getting glyph sockets. Because when you upgrade glyph sockets, they become absolutely crazy. Like, look at this one out here. It's level 15. At level 15, I've socketed right out here. It gives me 28.2% crit damage. Along with that, it gives me crit. Every time I crit, I generate fury. And you're constantly critting with Whirlwind, so you're generating 333 fury like crazy. So it's so good and so mandatory, I would say, at Wrath, that you want to get as many of them. And I'm going to show you the other glyphs. So Martial is another really good glyph. I'm not met the requirements yet, and I'm going to get there soon. But once you get the requirements on this, I just need to level it up a bit more, and I'm going to hit the requirement goal. But you get cooldown reduction on your shouts again right here. Now, because I told you this build revolves around spamming your shouts, you want to get Martial is like mandatory because it reduces your cooldown, obviously. Another glyph I like is territorial. This is just damage reduction and damage to close enemies. Pretty standard glyph. The fourth glyph I would like and I would say is mandatory is disembowel. Now disembowel is practically really good. It's not that good when you look at it. It's just 23 dot, fizz dot. But the main thing is when you kill a bleeding enemy, which is all enemies, you reduce the cooldown of your shouts, which is really nice. So between disembowel, between martial, between your two aspects, you have insane cooldown reduction applied to your shouts, along with already passive cooldown reduction from your helm and your amulet. So when everything comes together, you just keep spamming your shouts, as you're gonna see in my gameplay footage, and you just keep going with your Whirlwind. Everything else on the Paragon board is honestly, you just want rare nodes, you want all the good rare nodes when you're close by, you want good legendary powers if you're close by. I wouldn't even say if it's a mandatory, like this one gives me more vulnerable chance. I had 30% chance on my from my skill tree, pressure points, and now I get another 8% here. This is another just quality of life defensive buff. It just gives me more like another layer to my defense. I don't have any other legendary nodes on my build. I didn't bother taking anything else. There are many ways to go about the tree. You just want to take a tree that best suits you. Just make sure you get the glyph sockets, make sure you get the rare nodes, and anything else, anything that fits your playstyle you can take. A few good things that I like personally is hemorrhage. I'm going to try to change some of mine and pick this up because it's good for bossing, because as long as you bleed, they take 12% more damage, which is a nice legendary buff. I think Blood Rage is a good quality of life to have more berserking uptime. And definitely I would say those two are two of the better legendary nodes, other than the ones I have already, which is Warbringer and Decimator. But make sure you just focus on the glyph sockets. You want Wrath, you want Martial, you want Disembowel, and anything else you can take with these. As long as you have these three, your build's online. That's all I'm going to tell you. Anything else is personal choice. So territorial is personal choice. Anything else is fine. So yeah, that's pretty much the build. I think I've explained everything. If you have anything, any comments, or if I've left anything, please ask me in the comments. And I am going to show you a gameplay footage of my build. I'm going to put out videos of my dungeon run, so you can take a look at how my normal typical run is, the difficulty level of my build. And I do have room for improvement on my build. I can improve my weapons, I can improve my boots, I can improve one of my rings. As you can see, it's only like a 700 item power. I can get it close to 800 item power, which is just more stats, but my build is pretty much like solid all around. I can increase my glyphs for shorter cooldown, as you can tell. And yeah, I'm just gonna move on to my gameplay footage now.
I must wait.
This is a Greed Shrine. It's not a damage buff, it's just a gold buff, so don't worry. mobs are 5 levels ahead of us. Like no issues tanking them.
Not ready yet. Not ready.
As you can see, I'm just standing in everything bad. Nothing matters. I'm gonna take the artillery strike.
Not ready yet. Last week.
Yeah, and that's the dungeon. So that was a quick gameplay footage of the build. Those mobs were level 85, so I was 5 levels under them, which kind of showcases how good this build is. Despite being much lower level, I could tank everything, I could do good damage, and yeah, if you guys have any comments or anything, please put them down below and I will answer them. And yeah, I'm going to come out with more builds, more guides, and all that good stuff. Thanks guys.